Hi, and welcome to the iPhone Life podcast. I'm Donna Schill, editor-in-chief at iPhone Life.
And I'm David Averbach, CEO and publisher.
Today, we have a special episode for you. We're going to tell you all about Apple's iPhone 17 event. They're called it their awe-dropping event. So we'll tell you everything that Apple announced and give you a bit of our opinion about that as well. So stay tuned for a fun episode coming up. But before we get into all of our event coverage, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about our iOS 26 class. So as many of you know, along with offering our free tip of the day newsletter, where you can learn something cool about your iPhone in 1 minute a day, which if you're not on that, go to iPhoneLife.com/dailytip. We also offer free live courses that are going on all the time. And this time of year is our most exciting course. We offer our iOS course. So this year it's the iOS 26 course. You'll learn all about the new Liquid Glass redesign. Also, the Photos app and the Camera app are completely redesigned again. So we'll show you how to make sense of all of that. Plus, there are a lot of other cool AI features, Apple Intelligence features baked in across the device. We'll make sure you're taking advantage of all of that. So our iOS 26 class is underway. It's just getting started. So now is the perfect time to sign up. And this time of year, we offer our biggest discount that we offer all year long. You get 50% off or an extra 10% if you're a senior, veteran, or service personnel. So up to 60% off during this month. Go to iPhoneLife.com/podcast discount to claim that and to learn all about iOS 26.
And in addition, if you like live classes, that's underway and they're amazing. But if you also want to learn at your own pace, the day iOS 26 comes out, which we just learned is Monday, September 15th, the day it comes out, we also release an in-depth guide that has a downloadable PDF and step-by-step video tutorials for every single new feature. So we've got you covered however you like to learn. Both are great. I recommend both. You can attend the live class. We also have this amazing reference to use throughout the year. And as Donna was mentioning, Apple this year with iOS 26, it's a whole new operating system. It's the biggest change since Apple came out with iOS 7, which was what did we figure out 13 years ago, Donna?
Yes, it was when I first started at iPhone Life, and the iPhone layout looked completely different than it ever had. It's kind of stayed that way this entire time, and now they did it again. I really like the visual redesign, and a lot of the way the different menus work have changed as well. And then, like we said, there's a lot of new AI features too.
Mm-hmm. So Monday, September 15th, your phone's going to get a dramatic overhaul. Everything's going to look different. It's going to be in new places. We've got you covered with the live course and the in-depth guide and the biggest discount we ever offer, 50% off, 60% for seniors. Go to iPhoneLife.com/podcast discount to get it all and get Insider for the year where you get all these other amazing features.
So whether or not you decide to buy any of the new devices, hardware that we talk about today, you're likely getting this software update if you have a phone from any recent year. So
Yes.
let's get into the devices, though.
Let's do it.
So, David, first, I always like to hear your big picture takeaways. What were your thoughts on today's event?
You know, this is always a tough one because it's hard to get into it without getting into it. I would say a few takeaways. Number one takeaway for me was I was a little underwhelmed. There's some exciting new features. We'll get into it, but it didn't feel like there was anything particularly groundbreaking that came out. And there was a little bit of a disconnect where in the beginning, Tim Cook hyped it a lot. He said it was the biggest leap forward Apple's ever had in terms of iPhones. And then we'll get into it. And there's some nice changes, but it felt largely iterative and definitely not the biggest leap forward. So that's number one, was just slightly underwhelmed. Number two, and I feel like I say this every year because I'm an Apple romantic and I'm nostalgic, but it made me miss Steve Jobs. These presentations have just gotten so polished to the point of feeling like almost like an infomercial. And Steve Jobs, the reason why there's this rich tradition of watching these announcements is Steve Jobs made it feel personal. He made it feel entertaining, like you weren't being sold to, but you were just learning about some new technological breakthrough. And I do miss that. And I not only miss it in terms of the actual presentation, but I miss it in terms of the features announced. I feel like there just was a little bit less focus on benefits to the end user this year than other years. A lot of these were like tech upgrades, and you have these new specs, and Steve Jobs really didn't focus on specs. And then the third thing is, I don't think I heard, I'm sure I did, but I very rarely heard the words Apple Intelligence. Last year, everything was Apple Intelligence. Everything was all about AI, Apple Intelligence. And this year, obviously, this is the hardware update. So we did hear about it with iOS 26. But last year, the hardware update even was all about Apple Intelligence. And this year, I didn't hear much of it. So
That's
those
an
are my three.
interesting point because because it was a hardware update, I wasn't thinking about that much, and they did make a lot of comments about the A19 chip and how it supports Apple Intelligence, but it was less about the specifics of that. They
Mm-hmm.
did make the one comment that I thought was interesting when they first started announcing that iPhone Air about saying we've been on the forefront of AI since releasing the neural engine 6 years ago. And I thought that
Yeah.
was like an interesting line they put in there because Apple's been under fire a lot for falling behind on AI, and I think they want to try to set the record straight that even though they weren't calling it AI at the time, that they've been doing AI, which I
Which is
think
a,
is
it's a fair
somewhat
point.
valid. Somewhat
Yeah.
valid.
Totally agree. I think that's a fair point. I think Apple did a lot of things before we used the word AI that now would fall into that umbrella, and they were often on the forefront. Unfortunately, they are not currently on the forefront.
Agreed. Yeah, hard to deny that. I mostly agree with your takeaways. I feel like every year Apple says it's the best iPhone ever, the biggest update ever. So that's not that surprising they said that, and then the device itself wasn't quite as exciting as we had hoped.
Hmm.
On the other hand, though, I thought the AirPods Pro 3 and the Apple Watch Series 11 have some groundbreaking features that kind of made up for it and made me overall feel more excited about this year. I really wanted to want the iPhone Air, which we'll get into that device in a little bit, but there are some sacrifices that I'm not willing to make in order to get it. So that ended up being a letdown for me. So I agree. The Pro line that I'm left with, I will probably upgrade this year, but there's not really any one new feature that's that exciting to hang my hat on. Um, Outside of just I never want to like not get the new phone.
And yes, I agree. I do want to add the asterisk that I do think there was quite a bit of innovation in the iPhone Air. It just, as you said, comes with trade-offs, so that then made me dismiss it a little bit. But there are interesting innovations.
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
Okay, so we're just gonna go in the order that Apple announced. So let's start with the AirPods Pro 3. That, by the way, you can pre-order today. We're recording on September 9th. It's available September 19th. So the AirPods Pro 3, I think, was actually the most exciting thing announced today. And that's because Apple included, they really improved the noise cancellation. They have a heart rate sensor now in the AirPods Pro 3 that allows you to track your workouts with just an iPhone. And, I think it's great if you have an Apple Watch because you don't always wear it, or some of us don't, like me. But it also makes it possible to track your workouts without an Apple Watch at all. And that's a pretty big breakthrough that I think is going to mean a lot to a lot of people. Um, Also, an improved design. With that, we're going to have to test it out before we can say Apple did a good job on that. But it
Mhm.
also gets a sweat and water resistance with an IP57 rating. So that's a big deal as well. Let's start talking about the noise cancellation first. So
Mhm.
David and you're also a big fan of the AirPods Pro, right?
I am not. I'm really
Oh,
in the minority, and I think I I don't voice my opinion too much about it because I think it's more specific to my use case than it is like a tech, like based on my being a tech expert. I use my AirPods constantly. I tend to use them in environments where I still want to hear my environment. Like I'll use them around the house when I'm cleaning or when I'm doing some chores or even if I'm doing some work. And I like to be able to hear who's around me. I want to hear if my daughter's around. I want to hear if somebody walks up and says hi to me. And so I also prefer the fit of the standard AirPod, the classic AirPod over the AirPod Pro. That snug fit. Some people, if not most people, love it. For me, it's uncomfortable, and I like just being able to throw the AirPods in my ear and they stay fine. So that I like the kind of classic AirPods, but I think I'm in the minority there. I know everybody loves the AirPod Pros, and they're great devices. None of my complaints have anything to do with the technology.
Yeah, we really are on opposite sides of the
Yeah.
spectrum on this one because the AirPods, I don't know what to call it, not Pro version, they actually won't even stay in my ears. They fall out,
Which is
and then
common.
when I've tried to make them stay, it's like really irritated my ears and even made them bleed. So I think it's one of those things you really have to I would probably recommend going to an Apple store and trying on AirPods to see which model works for you because everyone has such different ears. It is a weird challenge for headphone makers to try to figure out how to do it. But apparently with this new model of AirPods Pro, they've done even more research on different ear types and they've made them smaller with 5 different ear tip possibilities. So it might be worth giving a try again to see, David, if they've worked for you.
I have to say I am tempted, actually, to be honest, because I don't hate the fit. Also, I have found that while traveling and in loud environments, I am less likely to use my big over-ear headphones than I used to be. They're just kind of bulky. They take up space in my bag. They're not very portable and they're annoying to sync. So I've been using my AirPods, which do have noise cancellation, but the noise cancellation is pretty subpar. So the idea of having really excellent noise cancellation, although I may not use it very often, does appeal to me. So I definitely I'm very excited for the increased noise cancellation of these. I mean, they
Yeah,
were
it's supposed to be
already
4 times better. That's
yeah, and the Pro was already really good. So it should be very excellent noise cancellation.
Yeah, I've been pretty mind blown by like in-ear wireless headphones having such good noise cancellation. I don't need to have the outside world completely drowned out. In fact, in a lot of cases, I want to be able to still feel like I could hear something important around me. So I may use the adaptive mode. I'm planning on getting the AirPods Pro 3. I may use the adaptive mode, which will filter in sounds that are machine learning says are important.
Mhm.
But I will appreciate having the increased noise cancellation, especially working from home now with a baby.
Do you find, as a side note, do you find the adaptive mode works very well for you?
I do like it. I usually use that over transparency mode if I'm out and about with my AirPods in and transparency mode, then it's just like you can hear everything all the time, which I don't like as much. How
Yeah.
about you?
I don't love it, which is why I'm asking. I
Mm.
think what I'm realizing this is a funny, again, some of this is so specific to your life. I often have my AirPods on when I'm around the house, and I find I talk to my dogs a lot. And I really do not need my podcast to be paused when I'm talking to my dogs. And so it does sort of drive me crazy because I'm letting them in the house, I'm getting them out of the house, I'm telling them to get off the furniture, whatever. And it's like my music and my podcast is constantly pausing, and I really don't need it to.
Man, I seem to have a feature now that you mention this that I don't like that when I start talking or someone talks to me, it'll just lower the volume on my audio, but it'll keep going. So when
Mm.
it comes back, I like missed something. If I'm listening to a
Oh.
podcast, that's something I should look into. But anyway, it's a bit of a digression.
Yeah.
So the Pro 3 has better cancellation significantly.
Mhm.
Um, it also has a heart rate sensor. This is what I think is the
This
biggest
is the
deal.
big one. Yeah,
So
exactly. This
it,
I'm really excited about.
I feel like Apple Watches, I mean, so many of you listening are Apple Watch fans at iPhone Life. Many of us are. But not everyone is. Not everyone likes wearing an Apple Watch. And up until now, it's been hard to track workouts or even walks or basic activity very well with just your iPhone because your iPhone can only um, it tracks your GPS location. It can tell if you're out on a walk to some degree, but really it's super limited. So now with your iPhone and your AirPods, you get heart rate and your GPS through your phone, which gets like can give a pretty well-rounded picture to track workouts.
Yeah, no, this is really awesome, both for people who don't have Apple Watches, and there's a lot of them. People who like if you ever forget it at home, leave it at the gym. Uh, it's really nice. I mean, it happens to me a lot where I'll go to the gym and I won't have my Apple Watch, and I'll always joke like, I guess I'll just go home. This workout won't count because once you get
Yeah.
used to tracking your workouts, it's really nice to track them, and it's really frustrating when you can't. I almost always have my AirPods with me at the gym. So it's a really great place to have a heart rate sensor and be able to track your workouts from.
Yeah, it's true, especially if you're someone who likes to build a streak. It can be really
Hmm.
demoralizing to lose your streak because you forgot to wear your watch. So this will help you get around that. Um, Another, and this is something that I actually feel like that's a feature that's been rumored for many years, and I've been sad when Apple didn't deliver it. I wasn't particularly expecting it this year either. How were you?
It wasn't on my radar. So if it's been rumored for years, I'd miss that because I was surprised, pleasantly surprised by it.
Yeah, I've heard it over the years, but so that was cool to get. Live translation with your AirPods is another big one. That's an iOS 26 update across the board too that will translate things like FaceTime calls and text messages in other languages to your default language, and that's powered by Apple Intelligence, and it's a really cool feature. I'm expecting that to be pretty life changing for people, especially who are communicating internationally. And the AirPods Pro makes it really useful for if you're actually traveling abroad. So you can do things like wear your AirPods to a market they're showing in the ad or in today's event. And as people are speaking to you, it'll translate it in your ear. And it was activated by emotion. I didn't see exactly what it was doing. It looked like squeezing the top of the AirPods or something to go into that mode. And then when you speak back, you can hold your iPhone up and it will show the translated text on your iPhone display to whoever you're trying to talk to, or you can have it play for them. And this is one of those things that I think Apple is going to be executing a lot better than other translation devices where they're saying it will like lower the volume so that you can hear more clearly the translated text. Like they're trying to do it in a way that doesn't isn't pretty overwhelming or confusing. So I kind of expect Apple's always been really good at taking things that are technology that's already around but then doing it really well, and I think it looks like they're doing that here.
Yeah, they talked about this at the event, but you're right. This was an iOS 26 feature. I think it's such an awesome feature. It's just one of those features that just feels like magic. Like we live in an era where you can live translate other languages in your ear. Somebody referenced today while we were watching the announcement the classic Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book, where they have it's called like a Babelfish, and you put in your ear and it live translates. And like that was when I read that book growing up, it felt like such futuristic sci-fi, and here we are, and you can live translate any language in your earbuds. It's wild. So I am agree. I'm really excited about that. Another feature worth mentioning that already exists, but if you are thinking about getting AirPods from this, it's worth mentioning. AirPod Pros 3, as well as the current version of AirPod Pros, have you can use them as hearing aids, which is also just an amazing function. And you can have they call it like hearing protection. So you can do hearing aids, but you can also do a bunch of customizations around your individual where what you can and can't hear and customize it. Really awesome feature. I know a lot of people need some help with hearing, but maybe either don't fully want to go hearing aids or they don't like the aesthetic of hearing aids. Hal, our founder, is one of those people who doesn't like wearing hearing aids, so very often just wears his AirPods, and I think it's so cool.
It's really nice because I feel like with current hearing aids, it's kind of a commitment to wear them. It's easy to forget to put them on when you're out and about, but a lot of
Mhm.
times people have their AirPods in their pockets. They can just kind of wear them. Let's say you go to a loud restaurant that's somewhere where if you have any hearing loss, that can be a challenging environment. So you can just pop your AirPods in and be able to interact more effectively at lunch and then put them away. I'm really excited for this feature to gain more traction to the point that people know about the feature and therefore it's more of like a socially accepted thing. Because the one thing that Hal has mentioned about wearing his AirPods is that people sometimes will ask, like, why are you wearing your AirPods?
Yeah.
in a certain, like, are you listening to music, or are you talking to me? So that's like the only thing that I think that'll just naturally shift over time. But a lot of our readers have let us know that they use this feature and like it a lot. Um,
Totally agree, though. It's similar to when the Apple Watch first came out, and like people were used to you checking your phone periodically, but when you check your watch, it kind of sends a social signal that like you have to leave or you're not paying attention to somebody. And I think we've gotten over that, but it definitely took people a while to get used to everybody having Apple Watches,
yeah, totally.
which is a
Um,
nice segue for our Apple Watch section.
yeah, the last thing with the AirPods, battery life. It's
Yes.
improved by 2 hours. You can do 8 hours, 8 hours for playing audio, and 10 hours for the hearing aid use. So that's pretty cool. That's up 2 hours from the Pro 2. And
Hmm.
I think that's a wrap on that. One thing I just wanted to mention with the fitness feature, of how it works. So the heart rate sensor works with your phone, and the phone has a fitness app that was introduced, I believe, last year, but it now with this update will track up to 50 different types of workouts from your phone, similar to the way you do it on your Apple Watch.
Hmm.
So that's how that works. So yes, on to Apple Watch Series 11. Um,
Yes.
the Apple Watch Series 11 has the same pre-order and order date as the Pro 3. So pre-order starting today, September 9th. And then it'll start shipping September 19th. So to me, what was the coolest about the Apple Watch Series 11 is it's the health features. They have high
Yes.
blood pressure tracking. So it'll tell you over like a 30-day period, it'll track trends and be able to tell you if it's noticing hypertension. And also it now has sleep scores for your sleep tracking, which I think it probably should have had all along, but I'm glad it's here now. But the hypertension, that's a big one. I mean, so many people have high blood pressure. Apple was laying out how it's, considered like the silent killer because a lot of people don't have any symptoms from it. So there's a ton
Yeah.
of people with undiagnosed high blood pressure. Um, I think it's cool that Apple does all these like studies. They said they had 100,000 participants in order to build their machine learning model to be able to identify hypertension. It's not claiming that it'll catch all of them, but they said they expect to notify 1 million people this year with undiagnosed hypertension. And so that's, I mean, that could save lives. It will save lives.
Yeah, it'll save a lot of lives. Because I completely agree. To me, this is a really big feature, maybe the biggest feature announced across the board because of the potential of saving lives. Hypertension is so common, it's so often undiagnosed. It doesn't have a lot of symptoms most of the time. And so it's something that people just live with and don't know until it's too late or until it's gotten really bad. And so it's one of those things where it's just amazing to have that in your watch for people who aren't actively trying to measure it. It's also often hard to measure because when you go into a doctor's office, weirdly, doctor's offices make people nervous, which then kind of you can misdiagnose high blood pressure because of that. So it's one of those things that's harder to diagnose, and measuring it passively throughout the day is a much better way of doing it.
Oh, I actually didn't know that. That's cool.
I mean, the usual caveats apply here. I am not a doctor, but
Yeah.
it's definitely something that I've seen where I'm actually somebody who, when I go in the doctor's office, I have high blood pressure. If I measure at home, I do not. So I don't like
Interesting.
doctor's offices. It's hard. It's a hard thing to measure. So
Yeah. And that's a feature Apple's saying it'll be available this month. And that's a pretty we've gotten a little wary of Apple being like, this feature is coming soon, because that can mean in a year or never. But usually if they give an actual tangible timeline, they stick to it. So that's expected to be available this month. And they're working on FDA clearance of that in the meantime.
yes.
Um, so yeah. Then the sleep score, this is one I feel like they should have because really most sleep trackers already offer this. It's one that I'm laughing because having my sleep scored gives me some anxiety as being sort of a type A person who wants a good grade. But I still think it's a great feature to be able to get more of a bird's eye view without having to get into all the analytics yourself and all the data, it'll just sum it all up and tell you, and you can go in and see why you got that score based on your sleep duration, your bedtime consistency, how often you wake up, how long you're in different sleep stages, and it'll break it down for you so you can get, you know, turn that into something actionable of how you could change your habits to support better sleep. So I'm glad Apple's catching up in this area. I don't want to give them too much credit though, because if you've used any other sleep tracker, you've already had this.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's also a weird one to bring up in a hardware announcement because it's not a hardware thing. I think they brought it up though in part because they also improved their battery life, which maybe then makes it more likely people will be tracking their sleep because it is a better battery life
Yeah,
now as well, up to 24 hours of battery life,
that's a
which
good distinction though. We were a little confused today why they waited to announce it instead of announcing it in the WatchOS 26 announcement in June. Because it is going to be available on the Apple Watch Series 6 or later. So, for
Mhm,
those of you listening, you don't need to get the Series 11 to get sleep tracking.
yeah. And
But you do need it to get the hypertension tracking.
I was actually surprised because we were chatting about it in the office, and I don't, I would not like to wear my Apple Watch while I sleep. Like that feels like it'd be really uncomfortable to me. And so I just assumed everybody felt that way. But a lot of people around the office use it to track their sleep. So apparently I'm in the minority there.
Yeah, a lot of people do. I'm in the same camp as you though, where
Yeah.
it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
So that's
Uh,
pretty much it on the Series 11. I mean, it's getting the liquid glass update. They mentioned some of the liquid glass faces, but again, that's a WatchOS 26 thing.
yeah. The other thing is the Ultra got a pretty nice update as well.
And we
So the
got a
Apple Watch.
new SE as well.
Oh yes, this is true. So the Apple Watch Ultra has it's one of those times where they make the bezel thinner, so it actually has a bigger display while the form factor is the same size, which is always a nice win. This is crazy. It has now up to 42 hours of battery life, which is so much.
It's so much. And for like, I'm not willing to get an Ultra just because of how big it is on my wrist.
Yeah,
Um, I'm just gonna pause and say that again because I saw it for a little bit of pixelation.
sure.
I'm not willing to get an Apple Watch Ultra because of how big it would be on my wrist, but I'm so jealous of a lot of the features on it, including that 42-hour battery life. That's so good compared to what you get
Ye
with any
I'm
base
right there
model.
with you. I'm jealous of the Apple Watch Ultra features, and I also don't want that large form factor. This was a really cool feature added. They have a built-in satellite communication now, so that you can send text messages when you're off the grid, which is just incredible.
And that's just on the Ultra, right?
Yes, that's on the Ultra.
What did you think of Apple? Apple always does different montages in their events, and today they did one on how the Apple Watch saves lives. And I just thought of that because one of them was someone hiking somewhere remote and getting saved with the emergency SOS feature. They really dialed up the drama today in that event of just being people being like, the Apple Watch saved my life. The Apple Watch owns my future and past. Like,
Yeah, and they do the same style montage every year for the Apple Watch, which is part of why it felt all the more like self-congratulatory. I don't know. I always feel a little guilty rolling my eyes at it because it is true that it saves lives, and it is also true that the new features save additional lives each year, which is just absolutely incredible. So I get why Apple wants to sort of brag about it, but it all falls in the same camp to me of like it now feels like I'm watching an infomercial, whereas in the old days it had a much more intimate, personal feeling, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I find myself speaking out of both sides of my mouth on it because I'm both eye rolling while also tearing up a little bit, while also wanting all of my family members to get an Apple Watch.
Yeah, I
You
totally
know?
agree with all of that.
Like, I think especially for any sort of older person, it's like a really great way to not have to wear one of those lifeline necklaces. Like you can
Mhm.
get a lot of the same features. Also, if you are outdoorsy, my husband has hypertension too. So like all those things, I'm like the Apple Watch, it's not just like Apple isn't just tooting its own horn for no reason. It actually does these things, and it's pretty amazing. But it also is cheesy and over the top the way they talk
Agreed.
about it.
I agree on all fronts. I will say though, I really appreciate that that is the direction Apple's taken this device. It was not obvious when the Apple Watch originally came out, that it was going to be so much of a health device. And I think it's really great that that is the direction they've taken it, and that it does save lives. And now they're adding more and more features that are a little more universal. Like AFib is a serious thing. A lot of people suffer from it, but it is not as common as hypertension, for example. And so, they're adding more and more things, temperature tracking, all sorts of things that then cast a wider net. It's a great product. It's a great device. I get why they want to brag about it. It was very heavy handed.
Yeah. So the Apple Watch SE had some nice updates. It now has fast charging and the always on display and the wrist temperature sensing. So that's good for vitals and the cycle tracking. I didn't even know that they didn't have this before, but the Apple Watch SE now can play audio through the Apple Watch speaker.
Yeah.
That was new apparently.
I'm
Yeah.
too much of an enthusiast to ever get excited by these SE devices. I try as like a pundit to talk about them because I know a lot of people do want them, but they just never have the latest and greatest. So it's always like, well, what features did they steal this time? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that it makes the entry point to the Apple Watch 250,
Mhm.
as opposed to 400, but yeah, that's about the most I can say on that front. Should we get into the iPhones?
I think it is our time. Let's do it.
So, all of the new iPhones are running iOS 26. As David mentioned earlier in the episode, iOS 26 is dropping September 15th. So September 15th, whether or not you're getting a new phone, you'll be able to update the new operating system. Um, if you want to learn about how to use iOS 26, check out our course, iPhoneLife.com/podcast discount. But yeah, so the iPhone 17, let's start there. One thing that's nice to see is that the prices for the new phones are staying at the same level that they were in the
Yes.
past. We had an episode a couple months ago looking at all of the tariffs and wondering how that was going to affect Apple device products, and a lot of you have written into us being concerned about that. So it's reassuring to see that it hasn't changed the prices of the iPhone or the Apple Watch or the AirPods. So that's reassuring. Pre-order
Totally.
for the iPhone 17 that starts September 12th and ships September 19th, and that's for all of the iPhone 17 line. Um, so where to begin? The camera's better, the battery's better,
The
the
display is
chip is
better.
better. It has let's start with the design. It's a little bit bigger than before. It has a 6.3-inch display. Um they're really talking up the Ceramic Shield 2 technology that they added to it. So it's 3 times more scratch resistant than the 16 line, and they added that to both the front and the back of the iPhone 17. So it's more rugged. That's something I think is meaningful. I'm
Hmm.
always a little sad when my device gets scratched up pretty quickly. They also have more anti-glare, like a 7-layer anti-glare coating, so you don't get as much of a glare when you're using your device outside. That's nice. They have some good colors. The 17 line always has good colors. Our team particularly is really into purple, and they've got a lavender color. The Pro line, we'll get to that in a minute, has more limited colors, and that's always we don't know why Apple does that. Um, so it has the base model now has ProMotion. That's been something that's been usually reserved for the Pro line. And this, I want to say ProMotion's one that you've really noticed and cared about, right, David?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's hard to explain until you use it, but when you use it, the phone just feels more fluid. Everything's more responsive. For what, and basically, just to back up, ProMotion is basically my understanding of it is the refresh rate on your display. So your display refreshes more frequently. I believe it's like 120 times a second, and so because of that, everything just feels more responsive and fluid. And so I think it is one of those features that does make your device have a nicer display, be more enjoyable to use. Um, One of the features too that they announced, it's across the whole line, but this includes the iPhone 17, is, I'm just looking up the name right now. They're calling it center stage front camera. But basically what it does is this. Um, Typically how a front facing camera works, like say you're taking a selfie, is that it is in the ratio of a photo. But now what they're doing is the sensor is actually in a square as opposed to a 4:3 ratio. And so what it can do is it can use AI, or you could do it with buttons, to adjust the ratio of the selfie you're taking. So, for example, if you have a bunch of people in a selfie, it will automatically frame it in the landscape mode as opposed to in the portrait mode. It'll zoom out, and it'll do it so you don't have to turn your phone sideways. It's one of those little things, but it felt like it was going to actually be really nice. It looked like a much nicer experience for taking selfies. And like, let's be honest, selfies are something like a lot of photos, group photos, you don't have a tripod, you don't want to bother somebody to take it. So it's a really nice feature to be able to take nice group photos with your own camera.
I agree. I think, it's both a hardware and software feature. The software part of it is using AI. And to me, it's an example of how Apple's making use of AI in really practical ways this time around. I feel like with their first AI updates last year, they're a little bit like some of them, like, um, what do you call the Genmoji and stuff like that, I care a lot less about. But something like this, like just yesterday, I was out on a hike trying to get a selfie, a little family selfie out hiking by a waterfall, and we're twisting your phone into landscape mode and into portrait mode and trying to find the best shot. And to me, like, and trying to figure out how you can hit the shutter button with your thumb in weird angles. And so this will make a difference.
It is funny how often you're doing these weird wrist twists and moving back and forth. And hopefully this will solve this. My partner's quite a bit shorter than me, and she's always looking at herself in selfies. And so I always have to go, I have a head, because my head gets cut off from photos.
Well, also, like one thing they said that's cool about this too is that the way that doing it in portrait orientation makes where your eyes are looking more natural too. Because if you notice
Yeah,
that sometimes you'll get selfies in landscape where everyone's kind of looking at a different spot and it's not super intuitive where to look. So apparently this will be better in that way as well.
totally.
And
I
I
will
don't know if that
say,
solves the problem of having your head cut off, but
I'm hoping that, because center stage auto adjusts, so I'm hoping there is hope for me showing up in family photos.
that's hilarious.
um,
What
I
other
will
camera
say too.
features?
Well, I guess I'm sort of bouncing around here. I'm going back to the battery, because battery life was a big deal across the board. It was a
Yeah.
major area of focus. It will be something we talk a lot about for the Air, but I think that, have you had this issue with iOS 26? My battery life has just been terrible in iOS
It
26.
has mine too. I hate to say it.
And I wonder if that's part of why they beefed up the battery. I think they're doing, the thing with Apple's approach to AI as well is that it's largely done on device, which is great for privacy, but it just takes a lot of power. And so battery becomes an issue.
It
So
definitely it's just to clarify though with the battery, I've noticed it's maybe decreased my battery life by something like 20%. It's not like the old days where I would put a beta software on my device and it'd be cut in half. It's not as dramatic, but it definitely still has hurt. And I've hoped that with the actual official release September 15th that it'll be better, because sometimes the beta software is
yeah,
worse. But it does seem it's practical. It makes sense that AI does just take more battery, and so each year they're making a more power efficient, better chip that supports AI, and they mentioned that a few times. Like the A19 chip, they're like it's made to also display ProMotion, and because that
mhm.
requires more battery, and they're doing it in a way that still has better battery life than last year.
No, they definitely I keep hoping that it's just a beta problem, which is why I haven't said anything about it really.
Yeah.
And hopefully it is. But definitely every year new operating systems have features that require extra processing power and better battery. This year though, the good news is they really emphasize batteries. So let me just go over some of these specs for you. The iPhone 16, so that's the base model from last year, has 22 hours of video playback. The iPhone 17, the base model of this year, has 30 hours. That is a huge jump.
That is. Yes, that's amazing.
So that's really, I mean, that's just going to make a world of difference right there. And I'll as we go through the rest of them, I'll point out the battery because it is significantly improved this year. A lot of times they say better battery, but it's incremental. This year feels like significant improvements.
Yeah, it's also the fast charge has gotten faster. You can get a 50% charge in 20 minutes. That used to be 30 minutes for fast charging. So
Yeah,
that's also a nice addition. The camera itself also has improved. The 48 megapixel resolution that is on the regular like wide camera. There's 24 megapixel as the default. Um, there's 2 times optical zoom. Optical meaning that you're not losing any resolution by zooming in. And they're adding a 48 megapixel ultra wide lens. So it's a little bit different for each lens. You'll see when we get to the Pro line, you get 48 megapixel for each of the 3 lenses, which is really pretty amazing. But the 17 baseline camera is also quite good.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and it has 3 lenses, like I mentioned.
It
Um,
it does. No, I believe it has 2 lenses, but they added. I don't understand because they keep the way they talk about this is, I think, honestly, deliberately a little misleading, because they do all these like fusion systems where they'll blend the images from the 2 cameras to create a third image. So it has ultra wide functionality, but there are 2 lenses on this camera. There are definitely not 3 lenses on the camera.
oh yeah, 2 lenses. Sorry. Um,
No, that's fine. They deliberate like they said you might see 2 cameras, but there's actually 3 cameras, and we're all looking at that and we're like, are we having to figure out what the definition of a camera is right now?
Yeah, so we'll also get to this in a minute. The iPhone Air only has 1 lens. So the iPhone 17 is 2, Air has 1, Pro has all 3 lenses.
Yes,
But
yes.
they like they are trying to give you all the features, but some of them are just supported by software, which just isn't going to be as good as the actual 3 lens feature.
Yeah, and we'll get into this. I think at the end when we do some more comparing and contrasting, because I think honestly, I don't think we need to spend a lot more time on the 17 because the reason you buy the 17 is it's the base phone. It's the cheapest phone.
Yeah.
And so it deliberately does not have all of the cool new features that the other phones have. So I think let's move on and then we'll get back to, what's worth it for who at the end.
Okay, so next up we have the iPhone Air. The iPhone 17 starts at 799. Um, oh, one thing I did want to mention with that though is it's 799 and the base storage for that phone is 256 gigabytes now. And
Yes.
that used to be 128 and you used to have to pay like 100 extra to get to 256. So you could actually argue that the price is coming down.
Well, and it's actually significant because our recommendation to everybody was to not get 128 gigabytes, and it wasn't enough storage. And so, by that logic, then you have to raise the price of the base model. And then, when you looked at the price at 256, it was hard to justify not just getting the Pro. So last
Yeah.
year, we were sort of like, who would ever get the 16 because the storage isn't enough, and then at that point you might as well get the Pro. So this does actually, in my opinion, make the base model at least a viable option.
Yeah, no, I agree it's significant. So the iPhone Air, Apple hyped it a lot in this event.
Hmm.
It starts at 999, so it's also um it's not like the SE version. It's actually a more premium phone and it's an interesting one because it's a device that has trade-offs.
Yes.
And depending on who you are, it might be worth getting. But for me, the arc of it was being really excited and then in the end being bummed because I don't think I'll be able to handle the trade-offs. So it's the thinnest iPhone Apple's ever made. It's 5.6 millimeters thick and that's compared to 7.8 on the iPhone 16. So that's a significant difference. And even with making it a lot thinner, it still has all day battery life. Apple didn't, when they said all day battery life, they didn't promise anything specific there.
I do I do
Look at
have
you want to
that
look at the
number,
product
Donna.
page to see.
Yeah, I do have that number for you because I do think
Let's hear it.
this gets important. So, the iPhone 16 Pro has 27-hour video playback. So that's last year's Pro model. The iPhone Air also has 27 hours of video playback. So it's the same as last year's Pro model. But this year, the iPhone 17 Pro, because they've upgraded the battery, has 33 hours. So it's less than the Pro. Let me look up what the iPhone 17 is. Oh, it's 30. So it's less than either of the other two models this year, but it is comparable to what most people have this year. The 16 Pro Max has 33. So there was a device last year that had more. So it's a trade-off, and this is what we'll get to. But it's less of a trade-off than I thought it might be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is significantly thinner and lighter. Let me give you the weight specs here because I think that matters. Sorry, I just had it here. It is. I lost it. It's
Let me pull it
significantly
up.
thinner. Oh, here I have it. Okay, so in terms of weight, it weighs 5.82 ounces or 165 grams, whereas the iPhone 17 Pro weighs 7.27 ounces or 206 grams. So
Yeah.
165 grams to 206 grams. It's significantly lighter. The width, I think you just said this, but I'll repeat it. It's the width is depth is what we're looking at here. So 5.64 millimeters versus 8.75. So that's where it's much thinner
Much
and it
thinner.
is lighter. The caveat there is what Apple is now calling the plateau, which was a very creative spin on saying there's a giant bulge on the back of the phone for a camera, which then it's thinner until it's not. So that is the caveat. I think personally, I did not mind the quote unquote plateau. I thought it still looked nice. Other people in the company thought it looked hideous. Donna, what was your take on it?
I didn't mind it so much until I've been getting press releases rolling in today of all the new cases, and it's funny to see the back of the phone just has this huge hole now that
Yeah.
covers up like the top third of the device. So it's definitely not moving in the direction of being less obtrusive. Like it's definitely becoming more of a big spot on your top of your phone.
The
And
other,
I think the naming conventions of Apple are hilarious, like what
yes,
they
I
come up
know.
with. It's
It
just
was a
like the
very,
plateau sounds very pretentious. It's funny.
it was a very optimistic name.
Yeah.
The other big trade-off, which we started to talk about already when we were talking about the 17, but it bears repeating, is that you only have one lens.
Yes. So that's the part that like for some reason I didn't notice that right away. And then when I looked at that, I'm like, there's no way. I've been using the three lens iPhones for years, and there's no way at this point I'm going to go down to one lens
Yeah,
for a thousand
exactly.
dollars.
And this is the other thing, and this is what we were talking about. The iPhone 17 Pro, which we'll get to in a minute, starts at $1,099, whereas the iPhone Air starts at $999. So it's only $100 cheaper than the Pro. So you're not buying this phone to save money, really, because if you
No.
wanted to save money, you would get the iPhone 17, which has two freaking cameras. So you're not getting it to save money, and you're spending more than the iPhone 17, and you're getting one camera.
So I think it's really like if you're not like you're still going to be able to take really nice photos on this iPhone, but it's just not going to be nearly as feature rich or high quality as the Pro line or even the 17 line. So I think you have to really be excited about the thin design. It's also really durable. Apple talked that up a lot for how thin it is. It's got all, the anti-glare technology, it's got the ceramic shield. yada yada. And
I
so,
will say I will say this for it, for what it's worth. When comparing to the 17, now we'll talk about the 17 Pro in a minute. The camera you're missing is the ultra wide camera, which is that point 0.5 view. I will say that I don't use the point 0.5 view very often. Uh,
is
do
it
you
because
use
it
it?
creates the fisheye effect a bit?
Yeah, it's because it creates the fisheye effect. So you can't do it with people in it, or they'll look like pears. And even if you're doing it of nature, it can often look distorted. If you're doing something from far away, sometimes it's helpful, but it's not. I can definitely see a case to be made to say you do not need that lens.
I
So I
use it a lot. I know it does distort things. I think if you have a person more in the middle of the shot, it'll distort them less. So I do it though because a lot of times it is just a way to get everything in that you're
yeah,
trying to get into the shot, even if it's not like the most beautiful artistic shot you've ever taken.
yeah. But
Um,
again, I'm a little bit select cherry picking here because we'll talk about the 17 Pro, which has a much better camera. So
yeah.
this all brings me to this point, and we'll do more comparing and contrasting later. But like the person who buys this phone is somebody who doesn't take a lot of photos and just wants a thinner, lighter phone. Like they care about the portability, they like the style of it. That's who buys this phone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it comes in like four colors. They're more of those kind of pale pastel-y, light blues, uh sandy gold. They're pretty. It's a pretty phone.
Yeah.
It's a 6.5-inch display. It's a little bigger than the 17. But yeah, I think it really is like what's exciting about this is just the way that it looks.
It also has the A19 Pro chip, whereas the iPhone 17 has the A19 chip. So it has the Pro chip. So it has a better processor than the 17. It's
Yeah.
just a weird no man's land phone, in my opinion. And the trade offs are weird. It looks nice. I also think it's worth mentioning, they put a lot of emphasis on the durability because if you're buying a phone that thin and light and then you put a heavy, thick case on it, then what did you accomplish? So
Yeah.
I think they're trying to make the case, presumably, that you either need a very light case or you do not need a case. I think they think you don't need a case. I drop my phone a lot, but yeah,
That would make me nervous.
yeah. Here's what I would say. This is so I did my best to make the case for who should buy it. I think that this had a lot of cool technological breakthroughs, and I look forward to buying a thin phone next year when they bring it to the Pro line.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Because
Um,
I felt like this was sort of like their experimental year of it, and then next year they'll make their Pro line thinner using the same technology.
what did you think about like they talked up a lot they're like that they're building their own modems now, the C1 modem that makes it more
Mhm.
power efficient, and it seems like they built that out for this Air.
This gets a little more technical than feel comfortable being an expert in. But my impression is that the modems available were not great, and that Apple has in fact improved upon them. So
Yeah.
I think that is something that you notice. Like for a while, especially in the early days of 5G, you try to use it and it would just drop in and out, and was actually very hard to use. And I think part of the problem was that they were lower quality modems.
Yeah, so, I mean, that might be kind of to your point that Apple's, like, building out what's necessary to bring a slimmer phone to the Pro line later.
Yeah. Yeah, and they've been working on their modems for a little bit now. Like I think this is the second generation of them. So in general, I think it's a positive change. It's a I think this phone will have a lot of positive technological advancements that will then bleed into other lines later. One of our questions at the end is going to be what device you would like to buy. Uh, which we'll ask it again, but we'll ask it now. Email us at podcast@iphonelife.com. But I'm particularly curious to hear if any of our readers would buy this phone and why. Because
Yeah.
I'm struggling to come up with a case for why somebody should buy it, other than just liking how it looks and feels, which is fair. But you're giving up a lot for that.
Yeah, let us know. Are you into the iPhone Air, and why or why not? Podcast@iphonelife.com. You can always get in touch with us there. Um, one thing I have a note here, and I think they just brought it up, during this part of the announcement, but it applies to all the iPhones, is the dual capture on the iPhone camera. And
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting. It captures a photo from the front and back camera at the same time. Um, that's kind of funny to me. I was like, I'll have so many pictures of my double chin as I'm trying to take photos of things. I don't know that I want that, but there probably could be a case where you would.
I would assume that it's something you can toggle on and off. I think that there's, people were giving examples of like when you're recording TikToks, you would want to have your face talking, and you'd want to be able to show something. Somebody was making an example of if they want to do a if they're on FaceTime calls. There's a lot of times where you'd both want to show your face and show somebody something else. So I do
Yeah,
get that appeal.
it seems like more for video, like content
Yeah,
creators. So that's interesting.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the 17 Pro. The 17 Pro starts at 1099, same pre-order and shipping dates, same base storage of 256, but it goes up to 2 terabytes you can get for that.
Hmm.
And really the defining features that it seems like I was seeing in the Pro line is the battery life, and then the camera is even
Hmm.
better. And then there's also this new overheating feature. I have noticed my phone will heat up a bit, and Apple had spent a long time in the event talking about how they've developed a new technology that will prevent your Pro from overheating.
Yeah, it's something they must have gotten a lot of feedback on. And I've noticed my phone heats up too. It just never was something I spent a lot of time worrying about.
Yeah,
But people worry, I guess, because they spend a lot of time talking about it. But yeah, the big change, the only thing I'll add here, and then let's dive into each of them, is they spent a lot of time emphasizing how durable it was. So
true.
definitely, they believe they have made it a much more durable phone as well.
But wasn't
Uh,
that kind of across the board for the iPhones? They're talking about the durability, or were there special things to the Pro line that I'm missing? I know it's made out of aluminum. Um,
Yeah, they definitely did put an emphasis on durability across the board, but I think and I think some of it is they have this new technology they're calling Ceramic Shield 2, which they didn't do it on the 17 actually. So the 17
no, they
has,
did, didn't
no,
they?
but not on the back.
Not on the
Um,
back. Okay, that's
yes.
the. I think I might have said that wrong earlier in the show. Sorry. Sorry,
So
everyone listening. It's just on the front, but the 17 Pro has the glass back, and so they put it on that too.
yes. And also notably, the 16 Pros all have glass backs. So, uh, they have now the ceramic shield on the back. They have this new technology called Ceramic Shield 2, which they put on the front, which they claim is 3 times better scratch resistance. So emphasis on durability across the board, but the iPhone Air and the iPhone 17 Pro have this ceramic shield on the back, which they claim is durable. And I will say that Hal, who's our founder, was here, and he said he has not used a case in 2 years. And I said, wow, you must never drop your phone. And he said he drops his phone all the time. So
There you go. Hal's
there
the
is a
brave
case
one to
between.
test that out for us.
He is a brave one. I would never. My daughter does like to pick up my phone and just hurl it at the ground, though. So there is that.
So
Okay.
on the camera front, there's some interesting. So the I also didn't mention the video playback. It's up to 39 hours video playback. I believe you said you had the most stats up and handy on the battery
I
for
do.
the pros.
Which also, just to make a side note here, all of these stats are being pulled from Apple's website. So we're throwing a lot of stats at you. I do recommend, if you're trying to decide between devices, you go to Apple's website, you go to the nav bar where it says iPhone, and then there's this little, you hover over it to where it says compare iPhones. And you can do this, by the way, for Macs and iPads or whatever. But I find it really helpful to kind of cut through Apple's marketing and just see the actual specs. So let me give you some of these specs now. The iPhone, okay, I'm going to work my way all the way up here. So the iPhone 16, we're going to last year's base model, has 22 hours of video playback. The iPhone 16 Pro, which was last year's Pro model, has 27 hours. So you go from 22 to 27, which is a big leap. The Pro Max has 33. This year, if you go to the 17, it has 30 hours. So the base model went from 22 to 30 hours. That's a huge leap.
Huge.
Uh, and then the Pro 17 Pro has 33 hours as compared to last year, 27. And then the Pro Max last year's had 33, and this year has 39.
9, right?
Oh,
So
a
that's
huge jump from, you started at 22 and go all the way to 39 hours. It's a big difference in battery depending on which device. And across the board this year got a big bump in battery power.
and this is one of the reasons I have really converted to the Pro Max. I
Yeah.
used to think the display would be too big. I've come to really love it, but the biggest reason I get the Pro Max is it's just so nice having that battery life. And, I find that I can sometimes forget to charge my phone overnight and it'll still last me most of another day. That's just like such a luxury that I wouldn't want to go back from.
Yes, I completely agree.
The color choices for the Pro and Pro Max were interesting. They have sort of the slate and the silver, and then they added this, what did they call it? I want to say burnt orange, but that's not what they're
It's
calling it.
they're calling it, so they have a silver.
Cosmic orange or something.
Yes, they have a silver, and then they have a deep blue, which I think the deep blue is beautiful. And then they have cosmic orange, which is so bright, and I think hideous.
Yeah, orange is one of my least favorite colors, and I kind of think I'm not alone on that, and so surprised by this color choice.
It's a bold choice for sure. Um, yeah, the other major change comes from the camera. First of all, you get this plateau, which is controversial. I think it is
It
inoffensive,
doesn't bother me much. I just find the name for it hilarious.
I think I would say if it were to bother me anywhere, it would be in the iPhone Air, which is supposed to be thin and then has this giant bulge. The iPhone Pro Max, you're not buying an iPhone Pro Max for its portability. Let's put it that way. And so it bothers me less. But the nice thing is it has an amazing camera. So they added an 8x optical zoom. So now you can do an optical zoom up to 8x. So just to really quick define this, a digital zoom is when you kind of pinch and make the zoom bigger on your phone. That is actually it is making your photo lower quality. So if you zoom way in, that's when you start to get these photos that look really blurry. An optical zoom is actually a lens which is magnifying the photo, and so you are not losing quality as you zoom. So you can now go up to 8x without losing any quality at all, which is
And
incredible.
that's so cool. I also like that all of the rear cameras are 48 megapixel.
Yeah,
And they said they're all fusion cameras. To be totally honest, I don't know what that means.
I
Do you?
don't either. No, I feel like I know Colin joins our podcast from time to time. I feel like we should have them on to do a camera deep dive because
Yeah.
they're actually like sitting behind me right now, and I can feel them cringing as I'm like butchering some of these definitions. So we'll have them on to correct the record on some of this stuff.
Well,
But
so
we're
one
getting
of
the
the
basics
things,
right.
yeah, one of the things that Colin can explain, but one thing that we were always telling all of you before is that if there's a little scrolly wheel that you can zoom in
Yeah.
using, that we recommended avoiding that because if you zoomed in, not to like the exact level that would switch to a different lens, if you were somewhere in between, you would get worse resolution. Apparently, like Colin was saying, that's not the case anymore with the Pro line, that anywhere up to 8 times zoom using that scrolly wheel will be you won't lose resolution. So
And
that's pretty amazing.
I actually believe that is what the fusion is referring to, where if you are
Ah,
in between lenses, it will blend photos from both of them to get you a high resolution photo. That's what I believe it is, but I just don't want to fully state that because I like to be, accurate.
yeah. Well, they showed a lot of photos, and again, these are professional photographers, so all of this has to be a bit of a disclaimer. But they were talking a lot about better color accuracy in low light and more detail at every zoom and light level. And from the photo examples they gave, that seemed to be true. I'm excited to get hands-on time with the Pro line to be able to verify that. But sometimes I've found when I've compared photos with friends who have Android devices is that the color vibrancy is actually better in their photos than mine.
I will
And
just to speak to that for a minute. It's actually, in my experience, a little bit of a trick where iPhone photos tend to take photos that is true to what the subject matter, whereas
mhm.
Android photos crank up some of the dials like saturation to make it look more vibrant for that exact experience. Whereas if you go into an iPhone photo, you can manually crank up those dials and make them look bright and electric, but Apple just likes that like more accurate photo. Um,
Yeah. And
but
I
to
actually I do hate it when people overly crank up saturation and things like that just to like give a more dramatic look, but I still feel like sometimes the photos are a little muted in a way that I've not liked, and we'll see. I'll have to report back once we get our hands on it because
yeah.
spoiler, I'm going to get the Pro Max and we'll talk about more about why in a minute. But it looked like there might be just more pops of color.
Definitely, there are very nice Android cameras out there. Not to dismiss that, but yeah, it's the same reason why when you go to like Best Buy and you look at TVs, everything looks bright and electric. It's because they do the same thing. At first glance, that looks great, but when you take a TV home, you don't want to watch TV at those settings because it looks crazy.
Yeah.
So it's a similar thing. Okay. Any other iPhone 17 Pro features to talk about? I think I'm out. Like this was what when we talked about being slightly underwhelming, the features we talked about, I'm legitimately excited about, but there's just not a lot. Like if I were to summarize each phone quickly, it wouldn't take me long. It's
Yeah.
iPhone Pros have a nicer camera. They're more durable. The end. Like there's not a lot here. They obviously have better battery life is a big one. So those are the three talking points, I think. They
And
obviously
like
have
I
better
mean
chips.
each of the phones they Apple did spend some time saying that the chips are built to support Apple Intelligence and large language models. So that is something that I think like in terms of future proofing for AI, probably getting the new device makes sense. They didn't get into specifics of what that like what exactly they're promising. So you're right, David, they didn't really spend a lot of time on AI, but I think that's worth mentioning as well.
Yeah. And the
So
other thing
which
that's
device are you gonna
important.
get? Or
So
are you
just
gonna
real quick before we get to our comparing and contrasting, the other thing that's important to mention that I think we talk about every year, but is still important, is the upgraded chip. It has a new processor. It's a faster, better processor. It's one of those things that they do every year, so we take for granted. Very few people buy a new device explicitly because of a faster chip. Uh, but over time, that makes a big difference. So if you have a device that's a couple of years old, you're going to really feel a difference in terms of how it functions.
So, David, which of these devices do you think you'll buy? Have you made a decision?
Yes, definitely. I think I will definitely stick with my Pro for the reasons we talked about. So first of all, I definitely need the battery power. I have a very specific use case, which is probably not very helpful to people, but I have a baby monitor that I stream from my phone, and it just drains my battery
Oh.
so fast. Like my battery's been dying before the end of the day. So, and I have a Pro Max. So with that in mind, that makes it a no brainer right there. I also do take a ton of photos. So having the better camera is really important to me. I travel a lot, and so that 8x really appeals to me. I find myself wanting to zoom in quite a bit. And so all of those things combined are I will be going with that. That being said, I think if you are listening to this, I think that if you have the 16 Pro Max, I do not think this is an upgrade that is required. Let's put it that way. I think, especially if you have a 16 Pro Max or a 16 of any kind, and you are happy with it, you're not experiencing battery issues. I don't think this is an update that is required. None of these features feel like, oh my God, you must upgrade. So I think that's where I'm at. What about you?
I would agree with that. I'm also planning on I'm going to get the 17 Pro Max. I've come to really like the larger size. Wait a second. It's a little bit bigger than last year's Pro Max, isn't it?
I actually haven't pulled those up.
Let's
Let me look.
check on that.
No, they're
Um,
both 6.9
oh, they're both
inches.
6.9. Okay. I used to think that it was crazy huge. Now it doesn't feel that way at all, actually.
Yeah.
The battery life is better. Being able to watch media on the device is better. Um, I agree that I don't feel like I absolutely need the new phone, but something that I wouldn't want to miss out actually on is the camera features like the auto center stage and the flexible framing. Those are things that are going to make a big difference to me.
Hmm.
The 8 times optical zoom is really cool. I already have found the up to 5 times to be probably sufficient for me right now, but being able to just like easily frame and take photos and share them to social media will make a difference for my daily life. Is there anything else that I'm also planning on buying the AirPods Pro 3?
Oh yeah.
I'm someone who I'm kind of streaky about wearing my Apple Watch. I do find that fitness tracking motivates me to get out and get that extra walk. I've been more sedentary later lately and I want to start getting more steps in. And I think I always wear AirPods for a workout because I find working out to be a lot harder to motivate without music or a podcast. So I feel like this will help me just actually consistently fitness track.
Yeah, so I will say I'm a little bit tempted by the Apple Watch. I have an Apple Watch Series 9 right now, so it's getting pretty old. If you're watching it, I've stopped wearing it. It's just a little old. I kind of am also streaky about it, and I haven't worn it lately. And so I'm wondering if a newer, better one will make me want to wear it more. So I'm a little tempted by that. I'm also tempted by these AirPods. I think the noise cancellation is tempting to me. The heart rate features are tempting to me. So what I'm going to do is when I go home, I'm going to steal my partner's current AirPod Pros and try them on my ear and see how much I hate them, and then make a call there. But I am tempted by it. It is telling that I start by saying I'm underwhelmed and then I finish by saying I'm going to buy everything.
Yeah, David, that's classic. But I do feel like Apple Watches you can hold on to for longer. Like I don't personally consider the Series 9 to be super old. I have a Series 8. I don't think I need the new one yet. So I probably hold off. I'm gonna hold off on the Apple Watch, but I'm
I,
in on the AirPods Pro 3 and the 17 Pro Max.
I do agree that they last longer. And I think real quick before we leave, I think it's worth kind of doing a little bit of compare and contrasting between the three devices released this year, and kind of make a case for who should get them. So I think the big thing for the iPhone 17 is the price. We talked about it. It's $799 versus the iPhone Air is $999. The 17 Pro is $1099 and the Pro Max is $1199. So it's from the Pro Max, you're saving $400. It's significant.
You get
Uh,
256 gigabytes. You don't have to, in my opinion, that's enough. You don't
yeah,
for most
agreed.
people, you
Yeah,
don't need to bump up your storage levels. So you're not masking another $100 there. So that's nice.
yeah, I
You also
completely
are
agree.
like you get a lot of good photography features in there. And you get the fun colors. The lavender and the mist blue were nice.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's a
so
great phone for most people. Like, I think most people do not need the Pro.
I would
Uh,
agree with you on that. Like I was looking at that, like I always do this. I was, tempted a little bit during the announcement of being like, maybe I'll get that one this year. Then, of course, I want to get the Pro Max now.
we didn't mention it, but they actually got rid of the iPhone Plus, which was the max size but the base features. So now, if you want that bigger display, the iPhone Pro Max is your only option, which to me is fine because I didn't see very many people opting for the bigger display but not opting just to get the nicer phone. So I get why they did that. You and I are converts to the iPhone Pro Max, so that's sort of in some ways hard to justify getting anything else ever.
I know, I know.
Um,
Although, man, even thinking about this now, I'm like, should I just get the 17? Because the camera features I just mentioned wanting, you get on the 17.
You don't get it. Doesn't, it's two lenses, not three, and you don't get that 8x zoom.
You don't get the 8x zoom, but you do get the flexible framing and the auto center
Yes.
stage.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely a very reasonable phone. I also think that one thing worth mentioning, you and I are both currently on the 16 Pro Max. So we have all these Apple Intelligence features, but if you have a phone that's older than what? It's the 15s that support Apple Intelligence. Is that correct?
The 15 Pro. The
Okay.
16 base gets Apple Intelligence, but the 15 base does not.
Okay, so if you are on a device that is older than the 15 Pro, even though Donna and I are a little bit critical of these Apple Intelligence features, they are nice and they are only getting better every day. So definitely, if you want to future-proof your device, it's getting less and less functional to have a device that's older than the iPhone 15 Pro. So it's worth considering upgrading there. And if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily need the greatest camera in the world, then the iPhone 17 is a super reasonable option for that. The case, we tried to make the case already for the Air. I'm struggling to make that case. I am hoping somebody will email us and tell us why they're getting it. Because to me, the closest I can get to is you value portability and you don't take a lot of photos and you don't care about battery life.
Like, you really, really like that it's thin.
Yeah. Thin with a summit.
Yeah. And durable. Thin but durable. It does sound nice that even though it's really thin, it's unlikely to snap or break.
Yeah.
But you're missing out on a lot of camera features, and the battery life is okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think for people who really care about the camera, still the Pro or the Pro Max is the way to go, because you can't really shortcut having fewer lenses, and the photography is not going to be as good. And it doesn't mean you need to be a professional photographer. Like, both of us having young kids makes us care about cameras a lot, or traveling and just wanting nice photos of your family.
Exactly. I think it's a good distinction. When I'm talking about taking a lot of photos, I am not a professional photographer. I do take a lot of family photos, a lot of photos of my daughter, a lot of photos from traveling, and I do like them to turn out nice so that I have those memories. And I think a lot of people are in this camp. And for those people, the nicer camera, the better processors really make a difference.
We want to hear from all of you, though. Email us at podcast@iPhoneLife.com. Let us know what products from Apple's fall lineup this year are you planning on buying? Why or why not? So we look forward to hearing from you, as we always do. We'll be back next month with our hands-on reviews. We're going to be ordering our products, so we'll have thoughts, and maybe we'll even get some expertise from Cullen on the cameras to share with you too.
Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, David. This was fun.
Thanks, Donna.
Bye, everyone.